Hello and welcome to my channel In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and today is the beginning of my weekly wonderings and wanderings. To begin with, it's Saturday, the start of my vlog, and we have wandered away from home, as you can probably see if you are familiar with my usual setup. I am not at home. In about half an hour here, I'm going to be doing a workshop for pianists at my church, and I'm here, had to be here early for a variety of reasons, so I'm just sitting here chilling and going to try and finish my reading for the historian. I need to finish up through chapter 60 today so I can chat with Molly about what we're reading. So I'm going to do that here in a minute. I am also working on A Tale of Two Cities, still going strong with that, about more than halfway through that one, maybe 60% of the way through that one. And still working through Greek mythology, again, a little more than halfway through with that. And I would love to finish that one this week. I don't know about Tale of Two Cities, we'll see. And then I picked up Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross for Epistolary January, but also because I need to finish that series so I can decide if I want to keep, Divine Rivals on hand or not. Probably not. I'm probably going to unhaul that one, but I didn't want to unhaul it before I finished the duology in case I needed to refer back to it, which I might because I'm in the middle of the first or second chapter and I'm like vaguely starting to recall stuff as they're mentioning names and incidents in the beginning of the story. So I'm reading that. And there are two other things at least that I'm planning to pick up this week. I picked up this book from the library. I don't know if it's any good. Yours from the Tower. I think I got a recommendation for it on Goodreads. Someone that I know on Goodreads read it, really enjoyed it, and gave it a good rating. So we'll see. I think it's YA, so I don't know, but it's epistolary and it sounded good, and we'll find out. I might try to read this week. Also, Kelly at Bookish Kelly and I, we had talked about buddy reading The Hour That Changes the World, which is the book about prayer. I haven't got back in touch with her since we discussed that, but I'm thinking this week might be a good week to start that. I have a couple of other options, mostly epistolary January options floating around. It all depends on how much time I have to read next week. We have this big storm coming, of course, as most people probably know, and we've already lived through it by the time you're watching this, so this will be history. But I have no idea what to expect in terms of closures. A lot of churches have already canceled Sunday, and the government has already shut down Monday, and I'm certain, libraries and schools and everything will be closed on Monday at least. From that point, who knows? We will find out. So I don't know how much work, if any, I will have to do next week. So if I have a lot of time at home reading, then I will get a lot of reading done. If not, well, it will just be another week in January. So I'm hoping for cozy times at home. I'm also hoping and praying that we get more sleet than freezing rain, because freezing rain will make, well, first of all, freezing rain is nasty. Nobody wants freezing rain. But secondly, that is more likely to cause power outages. And I don't want to be stuck in my house in less than 20-degree weather with no power. That does not sound like fun. We ordered a propane heater and it's coming today, and we have propane, but that little heater that I got does not last very long. So depending on how many days, like on one tank of propane, so depending on how many days the power goes out, yeah, could be an interesting situation. So we will see what happens this week, and also how much I'm able to film based on how much power I have to charge my phone. So we've got all of our power banks charged and ready to go, and we're going to have everything obviously charged up as long as we have power, but we'll see. All right, so here we go. Monday morning, I almost said Tuesday. It's a Monday morning. Yesterday, Sunday, was the big winter storm. And since it went through most of the country, and in that sense was a historic storm, I'm sure most of you have heard about it by now. And I'm so thankful. My big worry about the power, our power, as you can see, we have it. Well, I don't know if you can see or not, but we do. We have power. So I'm very grateful for that. And we are warm and cozy. Outside is icy. My husband and son are currently trying to chip our car out of the ice. So we'll see how successful they are with that. I obviously do not have to go into work today. The rest of the week remains to be seen. I'm gonna take a day at a time and figure that out. But for now, I am home, cozy. And yesterday, I didn't do a great deal of reading, but I did read another book. So I updated my tracker to 8 for January, which is really good. This year is off to a much better start than last year. And the book that I finished was The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. Editing in here just to say that in the ensuing clip with the discussion about The Historian, there are definite spoilers involved for both The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova and Dracula by Bram Stoker. So proceed at your own risk or skip ahead to the next chapter. You have been warned. So I am ready to give my final thoughts on this. Overall, I really enjoyed it. As far as like reading enjoyment goes, I would give it a 5-star because I enjoyed the reading of it. It was compelling. It was the right mix of fast and slow paced. It was uneven pacing, but that was fine because it was a balance and it needed that. It's a big book, so if it was all fast paced or all slow paced, that would be too much of one or the other, but it was balanced in that sense, so that was good. And it was an interesting story, interesting settings, everywhere the characters were going. It was fascinating. There was obviously a lot of thought about history put into it, although some of it was imagined and fictional. There's a fantastical element here, but it was very interesting to me. There were some drawbacks. One is that you had multiple perspectives, and I think I already mentioned this maybe in last week's reading vlog, that you have multiple perspectives, and if I remember correctly, they're all in the first person. One of them is mostly in the form of letters and or like a person telling a story about their memories. So it's like retrospective. And then one is in the present with a young woman who is the main character, so sort of, if there is one of the story, the main narrator, I should say. And we see her perspective, which is the present day of the story, which is in the 70s. And then there is one perspective further back that we hear from in the first third of the book that I think was also written in journal entries or letters. And we hear from that perspective. Then sprinkled throughout the book are letters and journal entries and articles that are also sometimes written in the first person. So it can be a little bit difficult to keep track of who is telling the story when. And I saw other reviewers, one of their primary issues with this book was that the voices of these different perspectives were not distinct enough, and that added to the confusion. And I don't disagree with that. So that was one minor problem that we encountered, Molly and I, as we read this story, kind of keeping track of who was talking. I also personally found it a little bit confusing about the timelines. We've got the 30s and the 50s and the 70s happening, 3 different timelines, on top of which in each of these timelines, they are exploring different time periods in history, but primarily the 15th century, but also some other historical moments. And that gets confusing as well. So it was a little complicated. Also, they go to many places throughout Eastern Europe and like Turkey, etc. So it was a little bit difficult to keep track of where they were in this story, which mostly was on me and just my own like attentiveness to what was going on here. But all in all, the story was very compelling. So I did have two main issues though that brought the overall rating down for me from 5 stars, because it would be, in spite of those things, it would be a 5-star read. But I have two primary issues with it. And the one is more personal and the other is a little bit more objective. So I'll start with the second one. I felt like in the end, the plot didn't really seem to go anywhere. In the end, we kind of were back full circle where we started, except that we knew more. Like there's this whole aspect of a historical mystery, uncovering things that were happening, this quest. It's definitely a quest sort of story where they are searching for clues and information. They're searching for someone, they're searching for something, they're trying to find out information spanning centuries. So there's this whole quest. So they discover things along the way on this quest, and questions are answered, but really in the end, the ultimate goal of the quest has not happened. So the ending is unsatisfactory in that sense. It's a failed quest story. So when you get to the end, other reviewers also mentioned this. There's this sense of, I read 600 pages for this. It's like, you know, a fairy tale where the person is sent on the quest and they're given, you know, all of the clues and the information that they need, and then they still fail the quest. And you're like, what? That's not how fairy tales are supposed to end. So it's clearly not a fairy tale. But anyway, it has some of those same themes and ideas, and it is a little bit disappointing, annoying, frustrating to get to the end and be like, that did not resolve the way that I would have liked it to resolve. In fact, it didn't resolve at all in the end. That was one thing. On the flip side of that, though, I will say that I do think the author was pointedly working out some thematic material, including in the way that the story ended. It seemed to me very obvious, although I haven't seen people mention this in the reviews, to me it was plain as day that the author was working out a theme about history and about studying history and the good and the bad of knowing history, and the presence of evil in history, and learning about that evil in history and how it affects the present day. But I can see her working out those themes, but it's a little bit disillusioning and a little bit, what is the word that I'm looking for? Oh, good heavens, what is that word? Okay, that took far too long to figure out what that word was. That was like here in my brain, but not coming out. And that word was nihilism or futility. That seems to be the ultimate message, that history just repeats itself and we can never truly defeat evil. And that was my primary objection. Words, they're not coming today. My primary objection to the story as a whole was because it's kind of sort of a retelling of Dracula, but not. Maybe a sequel, kind of. So in Dracula, spoilers ahead, in Dracula, Bram Stoker clearly writes the story as, it's really close to being allegorical for the gospel and how Christ is the only power by which evil is defeated, and that evil can indeed be defeated by the power of Christ and his death on the cross. The historian seems to be a response to that. And the response seems to be that we can have our beliefs and our superstitions, whether they are pagan, you know, like the garlic, or Christian with crucifix, or whether they're just humanism, like just the goodness inside of you, or other religions. Her response seems to be that evil is everywhere, including in the church, because she makes a point of the original person who is that Dracula is based on, who was an evil person, that apparently he had a favorite monastery, and where he was buried was a monastery that he visited, that he converted to one type of orthodoxy from another, and then apparently converted back to Zen. I'm not exactly sure all of the ins and outs of his religious life, but supposedly he had a religious life, and yet he was an evil, terrible person. And she also brings up the Ottoman Empire and the evil things that were done in the name of religion in the Ottoman Empire. And she's also making a big point about communism and the atheism in communism. And basically, it just seems to be a nihilistic, fatalistic view that it is not possible to overcome evil, and that even the things that we consider to be good as humans are inherently evil. And I can see, apart from Christ and Christianity and the gospel, how a person could have that perspective. Because you look around the world and that would seem to be true. It does take a great deal of faith to believe that God is in control, that he is working out his plan, and that eventually evil will be conquered and justice will be served to the evildoers. But it's not something that we see playing out on a daily basis in front of our eyes. We just see the perpetuation of evil, even by entities that are supposed to be good. So I can see where you can come up with this nihilistic viewpoint. So that was my primary objection to the book. It seemed to be a response to Dracula. It seemed to be a sort of, yeah, but response. Yeah, but I don't believe that. I don't believe that evil is conquered or ever will be. It seems to be a perpetual cycle. And anybody who studies history would know that. It seems to be the main point of the book. So it leaves you a little bit let down at the end. So there's that. Do with it what you will. That was The Historian. So I am getting close to finishing the Greek myths. I just have one section left in this story, although it is kind of a longish section, although I think there are only 2 stories in here, but that's all I have left in that one. I picked up, I think I mentioned this already, the second book after Divine Arrivals, Ruthless Vows. And I am 10% of the way through that one. And about halfway through the first one in this duology, the characters go off to war, and so then it's in a war setting, but the actual war scene is only towards the end of the book, like an active battle sort of thing. In this one, like the war is still going, so it's like, and then they're going to go back to the front where the war is. I'm not a big fan of war stories, so that is holding me back a little bit from fully enjoying that one, but the writing is still very good. I also started, because why read one book when you can read 5? I also started The Hour That Changes the World by Dick Eastman. I am buddy reading this with Kelly at Bookish Kelly, and I've been wanting to read this one for a while. It is Christian nonfiction, and it is about prayer, a practical plan for personal prayer. And I am familiar with the concept and the plan in this book and have implemented variations of it before, but I've never actually read the book. So I am reading that with Kelly, a chapter a day. So it'll take me about a week and a half to get through that. And that is what I have in progress at the moment. I also showed you, I think already, the library book that I picked up. That is going to be a priority. And I don't know, depending on how many actual snow days I have, kind of depends on how much I get done. Reading this last week of January, I have multiple options depending on what mood I end up in as to what I will actually read. So we'll see what ends up happening. I have no idea at this point what I will pick up. Some of them are Regency and epistolary, so they go both ways. So I can read them for epistolary January or for Feb Regency. So I can read them either this week or starting in February. So that gives me flexibility. So I don't know. It also makes it hard to decide what I will pick up. So who knows? Nobody knows. I'm going to finish what I've got in progress here, at least some of it, before I pick up anything else. So that is what is going on here today, and I will update you soon. Hello, it is Wednesday afternoon, and this is our 4th day of being homebound from this snow. I say homebound, it's not technically true. My husband went to work for a good portion of the day yesterday. The day before, he went to help shovel out the sidewalks and stuff. And today he went in for a full day of work, and we are hoping to be able to go tonight to Bible study and youth group meeting and all that kind of stuff. So we're slowly getting out of the being stuck at home phase. And last night we did venture out to go out to eat, and we went to Walmart, and that was a bit of a mistake because although the aisles and the actual parking spots, the aisles in the parking lot, they were all clear, like down to pavement, very well done. For some reason that I don't understand, the road in front of Walmart, between the actual store and the parking lot, was a sheet of ice. My sons were literally sliding on it like they were ice skating. And I was very thankful that I was wearing my boots that had good solid grip on them, or I would have been joining them, but not intentionally. So that was a little bit incomprehensible to me, but it's definitely still a bit of a snowy wilderness out there in places. And because it's so cold, anything that melts from the sun during the day just refreezes at night. So for 12 hours out of every day, there's an icy mess out there. So it's still a little bit interesting. I have no idea what will happen tomorrow, if we will be able to go to school or not. We'll see. But for today, I am, this afternoon, still enjoying my cozy home, and I have been actually very lazy today. I was pretty productive the other days, but today I've not been doing much. Consequently, I have finished 2 books. So which reminds me that I need to update my reading tracker. All right, let's do this. Take that off. 10 books read, which is fantastic. I'm very happy that 2026 has gotten off to such a great start. But what have I finished reading? Yesterday, I finished reading Greek Myths by Olivia Coolidge, which I did not realize until I got to the end and was reading the little author bio at the back, that Olivia Coolidge had gone to Oxford as a student in the early 1900s, like 1904 or 1908, something like that. It seems to me that there were not very many female students at Oxford at that point in time, so I thought that was pretty admirable. And I also did not realize that that book, The Greek Myths, which I gave my copy back that I had been reading back to my son because it actually belongs to him. So I don't have it on hand, but I did not realize that it was actually written in the 40s, I believe. So I didn't realize it was that old. So technically a classic. I really enjoyed getting that very basic background on all of the Greek myths. A lot of them, like, I was familiar with the names and I was kind of vaguely familiar with some of the basic storylines. And this one just, it's an overview. It's not an in-depth look at the Greek myths. It's intended for younger people, so it's pretty basic, but it's also very helpful. And it's a good introduction, a good primer to the Greek myths. So I have another book on my shelf up there that is in my 50 by 50 that I will read at some point in the next, few years, that goes more in depth on the myths. And I'm looking forward to that. And it's also written more for adults. So I'm sure there was a little bit of whitewashing in the book that I just read. So it's not intended to be an all-inclusive resource on Greek mythology, more of an introduction. So as functioning in that capacity, I enjoyed it. I did find that mythology, those stories are built on a very much shifting sands of morality and goodness, and yeah, it's an interesting worldview, to be sure. But it definitely was also very instructive to our culture that exists today and informative, so it's important to understand it. But I finished that yesterday, and then today I finished Ruthless Vows, which, interestingly, there are some book-to-book connections here. I always find it fun when the books like speak to each other in a way, even if not intentionally. So I just finished Ruthless Vows today, which is the second in the series, Letters of Enchantment by Rebecca Ross, which is about, there's mythology in it, although it's not based on an actual system of mythology that I am aware of. It may be another one that I'm just not familiar with, but I think that it was all Rebecca Ross's invention. There are, or were, before the era in time in which these books start, there were 5, I think, divines or gods and goddesses, and from 2 different families, it sounds like, and they were the remnants of the whole, divine realm that had existed prior to them. Then in the actual stories, we're down to two final divines, and one is kind of good and one is definitely evil. And so there's like this good versus evil aspect of it, and then the humans are caught up in this. So it was interesting looking at that other aspect of an imagined mythology. So that was fun, interesting connection between the two. As for Ruthless Vows itself, it was a satisfying conclusion to the duology, and so now I can cross another series off my list as having been finished, which, by the way, I keep meaning to show you my updated journal pages that I have. I made a new spread with all of the series that I've started. Anyway, this is another one that I can cross off as finished, which always is a nice feeling. And overall, I enjoyed it. I really liked Rebecca Ross's writing. It was more striking to me in the first book in this series, but this one still had some really beautiful moments. And it was overall, like, I really enjoyed the prose in her writing and her approach to storytelling. And I like the satisfactory conclusion of everything. There were a few plot points and things that happened in the story that I scratched my head at a little bit, inconsistencies that made me go, okay. There was some content regarding side characters that I did not love and keep me from giving it a full endorsement, but overall it was good. It was enjoyable. I wouldn't also say that it was entirely clean. It's fade to black for sure, but there's definitely that build up before it fades to black, so in that sense. And there is a few scattered instances of cussing in there, so those are some content issues. Overall, the story was fine, and I wanted to keep reading it to the end to find out what happened. So that brings me to my 10th book in January, which is wonderful because I feel like it gets me a good start to the rest of the year. Who knows how the rest of the year will go, but this is a good place for me to be at the beginning of the year. And on top of that, not only have I been able to read a lot, I've had time on my hands to read a lot, but I've read some really good books. So many of the books that I read in January were like this close to being 5-star, like this close. And a few of them cracked that barrier and were 5 stars for me all the way. But in all, they've just been very good and enjoyable reading, and I'm looking forward to reading more. As to what I'm going to pick up next, I really don't know, honestly. I'm still reading a chapter a day in The Hour That Changes the World, and reading a chapter a day in that. And I also still have Tale of Two Cities on the table, about 60% of the way through that. So I still have some things in progress, but as we're wrapping up the end of January, I want to finish up some more epistolary January mood reading just for fun. So I don't know what I will pick up. I have the Letters to Alice about Jane Austen that I could read, but I could also read that in February for Web Regency. I have Loyally Luke that I can get digitally through the library, which would finish up another series for me and is epistolary, is a contemporary rom-com. So that is an option, which I'm sort of leaning towards because it's just fun and I'm kind of in the mood for that. But also I don't know if I'm going back to work tomorrow, how much time I'll have to read during the rest of the week. So an easy read might be in order. Those are the two main contenders, but I also have The Bee and the Fly that I want to read, that I've heard really good things about. So that is also an option. And I'm honestly pretty much torn between the possibilities here. So I'll have to think about it. So you'll find out in the next clip what I decide to pick up and what I don't. In my clips yesterday, hi, by the way, it is Thursday afternoon and I have yet another snow day because I'm assuming the parking lot and sidewalks at our school campus are not safe enough for having school. I have no idea yet about tomorrow. We shall find out. Will I get a whole week of snow days? We'll see. But today I'm home, and my last clip, I was talking about the books that I might pick up to read after I finished the last book I was reading. And the book I ended up picking up was none of the ones that I mentioned because I remembered that I had gotten this from the library, Yours from the Tower. And it is epistolary. So I wanted to read it for Epistolary January. It was a total mood read pick. And it had nothing to do with the Regency era or fairy tale retellings. Although as I got into it, I realized there was a bit of a connection in that direction. But I was like, you know what? This is perfect for Epistolary January. We're almost done with Epistolary January. I want to fit in another really good epistolary book, so I'm going to read this one. And I also was looking for a quick read because I knew I would have one more snow day, but I didn't know about another one, so I wanted a book I could finish in that time. So I picked it. Yours from the Tower by Sally Nichols, who is an author I don't know anything about, but this is definitely YA. It's clean because it's all epistolary and it's clean, but it does have a decent amount of mild profanity. Okay, so nothing really terrible in here for the most part. At the outset and on the surface, it's a very frothy confection of a story. Initially at the beginning, I was like, this is so much drivel, but I'm here for it. I was enjoying it nonetheless. But there is actually some surprising depth to it as you go through, as you get deeper, and there's a lot to the story, more than what just seems on the surface. It's about three girls who have just left their boarding school. They've graduated from their boarding school and they're, moving on with their adult lives. One is in Liverpool, England, one is in London, and one is in Scotland. And so they're writing to each other. And one is a teacher in an orphanage. The other is having a London season. And the other one is stuck with her grandmother in the middle of nowhere and has no life. So they're writing to each other and a lot of different things happen and they go through some different experiences and they have some, life-changing moments, etc. It was a sweet book. It was well done. I really enjoyed it. I think I give it 4 stars overall. It was pretty good. The one character was very childish and immature. And initially that was annoying me for about a third of the way through the book. But then it began to be acknowledged that she was childish and immature. Initially it seemed like, it was just supposed to be funny and I was just supposed to enjoy her antics. But then as the story went on, it was acknowledged that that was an issue and that, she had to go through some circumstances that really were maturing and changing her. So it is also has strong YA vibes to it, but there is some maturity too as well. So it was balanced in that way. Overall, I enjoyed it. All right, so I do think what I'm going to finish up Epistolary January with is, and I have 2.5 more days to do it, and that is The Bee and the Fly. I don't know if I will finish it by the end of the week, but I'm definitely going to start it. On Saturday, which by the time you watch this, we will have had our live discussion, so hopefully that will go well. But yeah, Epistolary January has gone pretty well for me. And I didn't get to everything on my pile of possibilities, but I didn't expect to. I had a decent amount on there of possibilities. And I also picked up, some random fun stuff that I came across along the way, like this one. So, which I enjoyed. So, all in all, so far, it's been a success. And this one I did want to mention, the fairy tale connection. So there are definitely some allusions to fairy tales in this story. It's not a fairy tale retelling by any means, but, and I don't want to give away any spoilers or whatever, but there's definitely some structural elements of the girls' stories that are alluding to various fairy tales, and they talk about them in the course of the story. About the various fairy tales that they are kind of, or fairy tale tropes that they are acting out or living out, etc. So that was fun. All right, that was my update for today. And yeah, I'll let you know if I go to work tomorrow or not. Hello, it is Friday evening. Time to wrap up this vlog. Yes, I had the whole week off of school this week. Apparently the parking lot and sidewalks were still not able to be cleared sufficiently for school, so no school today. I'm telling you, the stuff that fell here, and I think they may have gotten some freezing rain there where my school is. Where we are, thankfully, we only had sleet, but there was a little bit further south, and I think they did get some freezing rain at the tail end of the storm. And let me tell you, like, the chunks of ice are very difficult to get rid of completely. So hopefully we will be able to go back to school normal schedule next week. The temperatures are supposed to rise a little bit, but not until Monday. So I'm not sure how Monday will be affected, if we will be able to have school or not. I don't know. Our school, the campus is at a church. I don't know if they'll be able to have church on Sunday or not. I'm not really sure. So we will find out. But I did have this whole week off, and let me tell you, I got so much reading done. It's been wonderful. In fact, I have another book to share with you that I finished, and that is The Bee and the Fly by Lorraine Tosiello and Jane Cavallina. And it is supposed to be letters between Louisa May Alcott and Emily Dickinson. And these two authors really did a fantastic job of portraying the tone and the personality of those two very different writers, and the sort of prose that they would have in their letter writing. I thought that that was really well done. They drew from, not wholesale, but like bits and pieces, phrases and wording and stuff. They drew from existing letters to write their letters. Largely it's from their own imagination, but they did have the assistance of actual letters to help them. And so they were very successful in that regard. I don't know much about Emily Dickinson. I have read some of her poems, but about her herself, I don't know much. Other than that, you know, she seemed to prefer to be all alone at home by herself rather than out with other people. Apparently that's not 100% entirely true. Like, we have this idea of a recluse. That's how you say that. Recluse. Anyway, but she was, but it wasn't like, you know, 100% like that, I guess. I don't really know. I did a little bit of reading about her after I read this book, and I don't think anybody really knows what Emily Dickinson was really like. Scanty information. Well, okay, not true. There's plenty of information. There's plenty of existing letters. There's, of course, her poetry. There is testimony of friends, family, etc. But still, I don't think anybody really knows. Anyway, it was very interesting. One thing I also did appreciate that I thought was pretty well done was that Louisa May Alcott, in her letters and the way that she talked about her family life, in particular her father, I felt like that was handled really well, with a right balance of acknowledgement of his flaws, but the true love that she seemed to have for him as her father, and the way that she did manage somehow to honor him throughout her life, caring for him up to the end, which is something very admirable about her, I have to say, because it's not that she ignored his flaws or was unaware of them, and let's face it, he had some flaws, but she understood his nature, she loved him anyway, and she forgave him without being a doormat herself. You know, I feel like she handled that as well as any daughter could, and I think that that's reflected in the way that she discusses him as these authors portray it in this book. So I like that. The only thing I didn't really like was how modern authors have this tendency to project their own ideas of 19th century womanhood onto these women that they're writing about, and they just get very hung up on that. And that's the only thing. There was just a lot of as if this were two 21st century women talking back then, and I just feel like projecting that 21st century perspective onto 19th century women is just it's a big flaw in contemporary writing. Initially, like the first third to even half of the book, it was almost overpowering to the point where I wasn't quite sure that I wanted to continue, because it was just too much. But that settled down, and as it got more into a rhythm and flow of things happening in their two separate lives and gave them something else to discuss, that was a little bit easier to read and more interesting for me personally, and more reflective of Louisa May Alcott and Emily Dickinson themselves, theoretically, than the authors of the book. Although obviously, you know, their thoughts and biases are going to come through no matter what. That's fine. But it was too much initially, then it settled down for me, and it was fine, and I really enjoyed it. So overall, a very good read for me, and I am glad that I read that one. And that was a very nice conclusion, more or less, to my epistolary January. And before I sign off, I did want to show something. I have a couple pages in my journal. First of all, this is, I don't remember if I showed you, this is the Brighter Winter Reading Challenge in January and February. And so I made this spread for that. This page is just decorative. And then this page, they have two charts for January and February. So I put both of them in there like that, like this little flip book. And then I finally put in a page for my series, and I really like how that turned out. Somebody gave me this washi tape for Christmas, so that's gonna show up a lot in my journals. So I wrote down all of the series that I have in progress that I want to finish, and checked off the ones that I've read, and then have spaces for the ones I have yet to read, I need to check off. So I read the next one in, so actually two, I got caught up in through the Timeless series so far until the next one comes out, and then I finished the Letters of Enchantment series. So that's nice, and I'm hoping to finish a couple more in February. And then this is my spread for Once Upon a February. I'm planning to just color these in, or maybe put a sticker on them, and then write over here with the books that I read for that. And then I have this Feb Regency page just to list on here the books that I read that are Feb Regency. And then I have a couple pages dedicated to my February reading. And one more thing I made, an in and out page. So this is to kind of help me be aware of the books I'm bringing in, and my idea is that I am giving out at least as many as I'm bringing in, so that I don't overwhelm my shelves. I've gotten a couple that came in. One, I don't think I showed you, my sister gave me a copy of The Rose and the Thistle by Laura France, which is one of hers. I haven't read it yet, and I've been wanting to. And then I ordered, I can't remember if I showed this, The Innocents Abroad by Mark Twain. I love this copy. I ordered this from Pango Books, and I'm going to be reading that in February. I got that specifically for the Reading the Classics Challenge. I also keep track of what's going out, which as I read a book, if it's not like a lifelong favorite or a classic or a hard to get book, I'm just going to unhaul it, because I don't need to keep every book that I read, especially if I'm not going to read it again, unless it's a book that I particularly loved. I think I might want to pass on to someone else, or I will want to reread it at some point. Also on Pango, because I had so money to spend, I saw that someone had this lovely copy of Jack and Jill. Now, this is my previous copy of Jack and Jill by Louisa May Alcott, and it's fine, but the slipcover just was too messed up for me to keep, so I ended up getting rid of that. It does have, it's in fantastic condition. It has deckled edges, and it has these perfectly fine end papers. I mean, they're not beautiful or anything, but they're in great condition. And then there is this, I don't know, frontispiece or whatever with this lovely illustration. And then it does have black and white illustrations throughout the book. It's really a lovely copy. However, without the slipcover, it's just kind of plain. And then I saw someone had this copy on Pango Books. And this one is not in as sturdy of a condition as that one. That one was a 1956 copy, I think. This one is 1928. So it's a little bit older, a little less sturdy, but I'm not planning on rereading it at any time in the near future. I just love it, and it's a book that I want to keep. So I love this cover. Absolutely beautiful. And then that's the spine. This was just a replacement, one for the other. I like to have beautiful copies of the books I love. I would love eventually to have copies like this of all my children's classics with these kind of, this one isn't embossed, it's just printed on. Some I have like this are actually like embossed. You can feel it. This I think is just printed on it, but I love that style of hardcover. All right, so that is the end of this weekly reading vlog. Thank you for sticking with me. Hope you enjoyed. And I got a lot of reading done, so there was a lot of talking. So I hope that you enjoyed all of it. And if you stayed through with me to the end, please put a little snowflake emoji in the comments and let me know your thoughts. Did you have a good time this past week? If you got the snow, were you able to stay home and safe and warm and read a lot? Let me know. And also just let me know how your reading is going for January. How did you do with the Epistolary January? Did you get everything read that you wanted to? Did you enjoy it? Let me know, and we'll chat next time.